Okay, hope now it's fine. Good morning, beautiful people. I'm so pleased to be back online. I've been traveling for pretty much 2 weeks now in a row and feel really a little bit exhausted. But it's nice to be back home, and I love traveling. I think I'm one of these people who is privileged to travel a lot, and I like it. I like the different cultures, countries, food, people, and the opportunity to see the world. It is surely something that broadens your perspectives and helps to understand people a lot more. Today we have a very interesting topic, which is part of the that we discussed this January, on customer service and wowing your clients. And today I wanted to speak about the tough clients situations, the situations where something goes wrong and where it might be a conflict, it might be a situation where the customer is not happy to the extent that it brings really up a lot of things, emotional discussions. It can be that the client is going above and beyond the way. And these situations where there is something going terribly wrong, people might get emotionally involved and they might stop controlling themselves. It is natural. I mean, I'm not sure. I wouldn't dare to say that we've all been there, but probably yes. Sometimes the things that are happening that are drastically influencing our routine might be very, very difficult, and we find it very difficult to control ourselves. And we will now talk about how to manage that, how to help your team to go through those situations, because they might be difficult, they might be very emotionally intense. And when I do the trainings on the customer service and managing the conflicts, I do always have the questions from the participants about how to go through that and how to manage that properly so that you are not stressed, how to make sure that you're able to take care of yourself. Despite the fact these tough client situations might be a very small percentage of your overall business, it can be, I don't know, maybe 10% or even less, 5%. Still, depending on how big it is, it can be very emotionally intense for your staff member. And I even encountered the situations when the people were resigning because they found it difficult to deal with the situations, even if this is a small percentage of the your daily routine. One thing that I found very interesting when I was preparing for this stream today, I decided to dive in a little bit into the history and to see from where does this phrase about the customer is always right, where does it come from? And amazingly, it's coming from the retail business, and it's coming from Selfridge, the famous London department store, when the founder Harry Gordon Selfridge decided to implement this idea, this attitude towards the clients, to make sure that the customers may shop and encourage them to shop without the fear of being neglected or ignored. Just think of where did we come from? The customers could have been ignored. Then this similar idea was taken over by Marshall Company in Chicago, where they decided to manage the shopping experience with the philosophy of give the lady what she wants. This is another, interpretation of this attitude, also very interesting. And last but not least, around the same dates, it's all the beginning of the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century. The famous Cesar Ritz, the founder of the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Even today, hotel is the benchmark. They have their own hospitality academy. By the way, it's very difficult to get into this academy. So they adopted the French version of this phrase, and they were saying "Le client n'est jamais tort." The client, the customer, is never wrong. So. Although per se, this is a fantastic attitude when you put the customer first, still we're living in a slightly different world and a slightly different perspective. These days, it might be tough if you're really following this philosophy like 1000%. It is important that we do that. However, there are situations where indeed the customer might be too emotional. And with all my respect, we never know what the other person is going through. It could be that he's, having a difficult period in his life. I don't know, getting divorced, or I don't know, have experienced some kind of loss in his life. So we don't know what's really happening, and maybe this situation that is happening between your team member and this customer, maybe it's just a reflection. Maybe it's just the way, unfortunately, that the person is exporting or utilizing his emotions. So this is one thing when there is something else happening in the person's life and he's just utilizing his emotions in the situation, which might be not as big as it occurs for him. This is one. Second, unfortunately, there are situations where the clients want to take the advantage of the business, and this is what we call the customer extremism, when they really want and they spend time on getting something that they want to get from the company. And unfortunately, I had, in my experience, I heard from my clients that there are situations when these people may even go to the court, and this is their hobby. I mean, they are persecuting certain companies for certain things. So, but again, this is a really small percentage of your clients. And I always say that although this may take a lot of your time, a lot of your emotions, a lot of time of the senior management even to manage to calm down the situation, still this is a small percentage. So fortunately, I mean, if you have a lot of that, then that there is an issue, but when it's a small percentage, this is normal. Yeah, and we have to cope with that. Now, with regards to how to support your team, how to empower the team, there are a few topics that I want to cover today. I want to talk a little bit how to differentiate between the feedback that you get from the clients, and what is called the constructive feedback and the abusive behavior. This is certainly one of the things that is necessary that your team is able to spot this out, because depending on that, we go either way or another way. I would like to talk about how to empower your team during the tough clients interactions. I will give a few business cases, and I want to talk a little bit about which tools you should have definitely to make sure that your team is feeling supported. I also want to talk about how to deal with the emotional weight and how we can help the teams to make sure that they are emotionally safe, that they're stable, that they're getting the proper support. And yeah, we'll talk about some practical tools and techniques, although it's better to have them covered within the training programs. Nothing stops us to talk a little bit about, what potentially you may want to implement, and at least to have an idea what's existing. Okay, good. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them on the chats, depending on where you are watching us, be it Facebook or LinkedIn. I have access to the chat. I don't see it right away, so I'm, mingling in between my notes and the Streamline platform. So I will make sure that I go through the questions if you have any. And if you will be watching the recording of the stream, of course, feel free to reach me out, and I will be happy to reply to you directly. Or maybe that could be another good topic for the next stream. So speaking about the starting point, which actually helps us to make sure that we manage the situation in the right way. The basics is that, and I take it for granted that you have standards implemented. When you have standards implemented and when you have a proper feedback loop and you are constantly reviewing them, this you may have some time to watch my previous stream where we have been talking about that. So if you have standards implemented, highly likely that you will encounter less of those difficult situations. If you have them, make sure that you have the proper feedback loop. You talk through that. You make sure that you are eliminating the potential for repeating of those situations. And there is one thing that I want to mention is that if something goes wrong, we are all very loyal to our companies, to our business, at least I hope so. One thing that sometimes happens is that we are becoming like overly protective. So we kind of want to make sure to prove ourselves right. Okay. And when you hear people saying like, oh, but this is according to our standards, or oh, we never do that, or we always do it that way, be careful, because this can be the red flag. If you're doing something in a certain way, not necessarily that this should be done in that way, or that you should be keep on doing that in that way. Maybe it's a good option for reviewing certain things. And I remember we had the same with one of our clients in my team. Is that we had a client who was complaining, let's put it that way, about the communication channels that we have been using. And he kept on saying, this is not the way it is structured is not convenient. My team, with all of the experience that we had, we have crafted it in a certain way because of this and that, blah blah blah, the whole thing. I realized that at a certain point we were really protective, and we tried to persuade the customer, no, that's the way we should be doing that. And we tried to persuade the customer why these things should be done that way. But then I inside, and I was like, looking at that complaint, like, really, why do we do it that way? If this is not convenient, and indeed the customer is like, with the concept that I was mentioning earlier from Ritz, is that the customer is never wrong. And I was like, really? And apparently the client was right, because we have created the process that, yes, we took into consideration our previous experience. We structured that in a certain way, also considering our capabilities. But I realized that the way we have structured that was a compromise between our previous experience and what we could do. Although the little changes definitely could have made this process more efficient, given that there were new technologies appearing between the time when we have set up this process and now. So coming back to the point, if you have some repeating situations, could be that you may, look differently at the process, and it could be that the way it is wired right now is probably maybe not the best way. However, even if you have the standards, even if you have the proper feedback loop, and you keep on monitoring what you are doing and making it more efficient and changing it depending on the situation, there is one thing that differentiates and allows us to choose either way or another, is that to make sure that your frontline employees are able to differentiate between the constructive feedback from the client and the abusive behavior. Okay, these are two different things. Constructive feedback is something that the client is conveying to you, which is fair, which is bringing up to light your gaps in whatever service or the process. This is something that allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer. So this is something what allows you to really see the gaps and to action accordingly. The abusive behavior is that when the person is becoming overly emotional, or he is manipulating. And when I talk about manipulation, this is when the person is using your feelings and the employees' feelings to make sure that this person is not really feeling well. Okay, so it's more personal interaction. When I talk about the abusive behavior, still you can go through the different layers of the situation. And situation consists of three layers. First, there is always some fact, something that has happened, the fact, the gap in the service, something that went wrong. So there is a fact, something have happened. Then there is the next layer is how the person is interpreting what has happened. It's the interpretation of the actual event. And then there is the next layer, which is the emotions which the person is like feeling about the interpretation of what has happened. So when I'm talking about the customer's abusive behavior, this is usually the interaction on this third level, on the emotional level. Now, our objective in those situations is make sure that we're getting to the fact and trying to understand what really has happened. What is this circumstance? Yeah, what is this? What actually have happened? What made this, whole three layers to work out to that extent? So this is a very good opportunity to make sure that we find this, gap, because we still have to work with that. And when I'm talking about the abusive behavior, one thing which is very important is that this is exactly the situations where it is difficult for your team members to manage that. Because when there is a person who is emotionally involving you into the interaction, depending on, I mean, there are at least two persons communicating in this interaction. So this emotional interaction depends a lot on, let's put it that way, the recipient's level of emotional intelligence. And it can be very difficult. It can be very emotionally intense. Your team member may feel really down, and this is our role to support our team members as well. I like very much example that I encountered with one of the hotels that we've been working with. There was a situation where the guest was really misbehaving, and when I'm saying that, that was really, he was impolite, he was rude to the team members. He was, sitting there like pretending or feeling that everybody, should make sure that they please him. And what the general manager of this hotel did when he saw that, he literally asked the guest to leave. And it was a five-star property. It was, the situation where, like, you do your utmost to make sure that every guest is happy. So what I'm, my advice, if I may, my advice is that to make sure that your team members are able to see the abusive behavior, that they escalate that, and there is nothing wrong to say not to provide business to the person who is abusive. Okay. So to finalize this talking about if the customer is always right, the correct answer is no. Hope you by now you know it. And it's very important to differentiate between the constructive feedback and abusive behavior. When you're facing those difficult situations, still the major part is to make sure that you find this gap. Okay, what is really happening that makes the person feel that way? What is really that we might need to look at? This is the crucial point to make sure that There must be something. We need to double check on the system. I'm sorry. Um, yeah, when we're talking about the emotional weight that your timbers might be taking over, um, small. Actually, the amount of time that people are usually reflecting on those difficult situations is enormous. Again, I'm reflecting on my experience in conducting the trainings dedicated to customer service. People can talk about that for hours, and because of this is people are emotionally involved, they want to find an explanation. They want to understand why this person was behaving like that. There are sometimes the situations when the person was asking a question like, but this is against my values. This is not how I would behave, how that person could have been behaving that way. So people are trying to find the explanations. They want to restore their self-esteem. They want to feel valuable again. They want to make sure that they're going through that. So the minimum thing that you can do about that is to make sure that you provide proper debriefs with your team members, team wise and one on one, with regards to the challenging situations. And please accept that as a fact that. We're not psychologists. I mean, we as leaders, we're not psychologists. I mean, it's not probably part of our job to, uh, you know, provide the psychological support. However, there are sometimes companies which are doing that, and I know that they are at the Airbnb. They have a dedicated team to handle the safety and conflict resolution situations. Apple provides. Support. It has a lot of trainings on the stress management techniques for their team members because it is emotionally intense. So, number one, make sure that you have a proper debrief process when we talk about the challenging situations. You need to make sure that, first of all, you go through these three layers. You go through emotions, you go through interpretation of what has happened, and you make sure that you get to the gap, what actually have happened. Number one. Number two, supporting your team and making sure that you help them to differentiate between the emotions and the situations. It might take some time. You might, depending on how big is your team and depending on how many situations you might have, you might probably need an external support or somebody who is providing this support because it is difficult, it is emotionally intense. Uh, and last but not least, you need to make sure that you have the opportunity to process these emotions, to talk through, to use these as a ground for further discussions, to make sure that you provide the emotional support to your team member, because sometimes it's not their fault. And in the majority of cases, it's not their fault. It's just, the different aspects of the issue that evolved that way. So going back to practical tools and techniques, there are, like, I don't know, dozens of the different acronyms like LEAPS or HERD or stuff like that. You may Google for that. I don't want to invest time in that. I want to touch base a little bit more like complex tools. The advantage of the acronyms is that it gives you like action items, do this and that. It helps, of course. It helps. It at least, it's in your mind, your team members' mind. They know how to follow, what they need to say, how they need to react. But there is still the inner me, which sometimes does not allow me to follow, the guidelines as they are. So one of the communication models, which I think is very helpful in customer service and managing tough client situations, is the so-called non-violent communication. This is where you train your team members talk from the perspective of what has happened and what we would like to happen further. It's like, a little bit, differentiating between the emotions and the fact what have happened. It is helpful in more helpful in utilizing your emotions and making sure that you are providing this support to your team members. So non-violent communication is something that is helpful to the extent that at least it helps us to differentiate between the fact what have happened and the emotions. Okay. um, Another communication model is a so-called communication according to the emotion and against the emotion. I also give this model in our trainings. This is something that requires some time to implement that into your daily practice. It's not only about job, it's generally about managing your emotions. It is extremely helpful for the people who are getting emotionally involved in the different situations. So that's the model that allows you to consciously choose your actions depending on the emotions that you identify. So, trying to put it simple, if I'm angry, if I act according to my emotion, I may choose to speak loud, fight for being right, trying to push for my solution. This is about being angry and following your emotion. Choosing to act against your emotion is to do something completely the contrary. It's like to come down, to speak in a softer voice, trying to hear the other party, trying to find the solution. It sounds like logical. It sounds difficult to implement because when I'm angry, I need to make sure that I kind of take control of my emotions. But it's a very rational model. And if you practice that from time to time, and if you implement that as part of your daily routine, it is really helpful. When you may consciously choose how to act, when you can identify your emotion and just go through mentally very quickly through this process. If I follow my emotion, I get X circumstances. If I don't follow my emotions, I get Y circumstances. It is something that requires time to implement, but this helps to build your resilience skills and helps to become less emotionally involved, attached to the situation, and helps to work with the facts. There are many other opportunities, and depending on the size of the company, you may want to implement the mindfulness techniques or there is something, yeah, there are different support tools that you may implement within your team. It's the mindfulness workshops or techniques, it's the micro breaks, it's mental reset techniques. With one of the teams, we have implemented a so called complaint time. This is where we allocate half an hour weekly to complain, to really, get it, let it go. It allows to drill down the emotions. It allows to make sure that we all want to be children sometimes. So sometimes you just want to complain, to have somebody to grasp you, to hug you, and to say you're good. It's yeah, it happens. It's a difficult situation. It's a difficult time, but you're good. You're managing. You're doing a great job. So sometimes even that helps. So, with this context, one last thing that I want to add as the final point is that all what we have discussed are the opportunities that you may implement. However, there is one very, very much important critical point, I would say, that may help you to deal with the difficult situations is to make sure that you have a psychologically safe environment for your employees. When they feel heard, when they get support, when they know that whatever happens, you will be there to make sure that you together go through these difficult situations. If this is not the case, and believe me, I have seen different cases where the company is not supporting the team members, where the company is thinking that the customer is always right and whatever he said, the employee is wrong. I have seen the situations when the manager was literally, especially when we talk about the escalation process, where there is a manager stepping in and the way he interacts with the client or with the guest is actually diminishes and devaluates whatever his team member have just done. Yeah, there are different cases. Let's put it that way. My you. Um, Make sure that you are there for your team members. Make sure that you're looking at these tough situations as the opportunity to improve, because there is always something fair and there is always something that we can take over. And make sure that your business is growing with this attitude, which is the integral part. I haven't seen any single company that we've been working for and they're not existing that are 100% perfect. There is also always something that is difficult. There are always conflict situations. There is nothing wrong about that. The life wouldn't be interesting without these tough situations. So just be there, support your teams, make sure that you're treating that as the opportunity to evolve, because this is that opportunity. I thank you so very much for being here with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Our next stream will be highly likely dedicated to cultural aspect of managing your teams, and we will also talk about the customer service as usual. I wish you a fantastic Friday. I wish you a fantastic weekend. And yeah, stay tuned. See you next time. Thank you.